Shavua Tov. The hat is empty, and the magician reaches in and pulls out a rabbit. And he says, voila! That was impossible, there was nothing there, and yet there is the rabbit. Voila! Which in Arabic, I guess, would be voila. We are a nation of voila. We believe in God and do the impossible. But how do we do the impossible? What is the secret of this trick? It seems like we shouldn't exist, and yet here we are in our own homeland. Yitzchak, as we said, is a person whose name, Yitzchak, could be translated as voila, because he shouldn't have existed. His mother was 90 years old, his father was 100 when he was born. That's really unnatural. And then he was supposed to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah, and yet he walked down off that mountain. Again, voila, shouldn't be. And he himself sensed that his days were borrowed because he thinks he's going to die any moment. He calls in his son Esav to give him a blessing. Yitzchak was going to live 40 years after that. Voila! How is that done? The Jewish people create voila throughout history. We've invented medicines and cures and technologies. How, in far greater percentage and proportion to other nations, how is that possible? What is the secret of voila? How is it that we believe in God and do the impossible? How do we do the impossible? Well, Yaakov runs away from Esav, who wants to kill him. And he comes to his uncle's land. He meets his uncle, a fellow by the name of Lavan. Lavan is the great fraudster and cheater. From day one, he's taken advantage of his nephew Jacob. The first thing he does, Jacob wants to marry Rachel. He switches it so it's Leah. He ends up marrying both of them. And it goes downhill from there. And finally, after Jacob has been there for about 20 years, he's ready to go back to the land of Canaan, and Lavan says to him with a big smile, "Oh, well, I have to tell you your salary. What are you going to get paid? Tell me what you want to get paid." So Yaakov doesn't oblige. He says, "No. Don't tell me. Don't give me a specific salary. I'm not going to tell you. Here's what I want to do. You've got lots of animals. Take away any animal that has any white in it whatsoever. Leave me just the solid-colored, dark animals. I will shepherd them for a season, and then they will have offspring, and any of the offspring that are speckled and spotted with white in them, they will be mine." Lavan hears this, and we see what a crook he is. He doesn't say to Yaakov, he doesn't say, "Listen, my dear nephew, you work so hard. No. Give me a salary. Tell me how much. I'll give it to you." Because what you're suggesting, you're going to end up with nothing. Everybody knows that solid-colored animals, if they breed with each other, are going to create more solid-colored animals. Everybody knows that. You're ending up with nothing. But Lavan doesn't do that. Lavan, when he hears this offer, he says, "Yes! May it be so." That's an exact translation of what Lavan actually said. Why did Yaakov not listen to Lavan and give a normal salary? And how did Yaakov know that this was going to end up well? If you know the story, Yaakov takes sticks and puts patterns on them, puts them in the watering troughs, and all these solid-colored animals, he uses the sticks to motivate them to mate, and they end up giving birth to a tremendous amount of spotted and speckled animals. Yaakov becomes a rich man. How did Yaakov know that was going to happen? How did he understand, apparently, Mendelian genetics, which talk about a dominant gene? Apparently these species had a dominant gene for speckles and spots, and Yaakov knew that, and he knew that these particular animals that themselves were not speckled and spotted because of the recessive gene, but that the dominant gene was going to express itself in the next generation, and they would be, I think the ratio is 3-to-1, I forget exactly how it works, I forgot to get a doctorate in genetics, so he knew that this would end up well. How did he know? Where did he learn genetics? Did he go to Yeshiva University on the way over? I don't know. At any rate, why does he do his salary in this fashion, and how did he know? How is it that the Jewish people invents and creates and innovates far beyond the proportion of our numbers? What's the secret? The answer lies in the way we understand science. Now, for many years, science was assumed to be the enemy of religion. For example, whether the world was created or not. For many, many years, most of history, scientists would say the world was kadmon. It existed forever. There was no beginning. Well, if you don't have a beginning, then you don't have the phrase, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth," and you don't have a God either. So I guess there's an agenda there as well. Now, about 100 years ago, a theory called the Big Bang came into fashion, which has since been borne out by astronomical observations. And the Big Bang posits that the entire universe was started as a small speck of tremendous energy, which then cooled off, exploded, and started expanding and stretching, which we observe to this very day. That was the Big Bang theory. And the remarkable thing about this Big Bang theory is that it had scientists acknowledging and agreeing that indeed there was a beginning, a creation. In the beginning, they may not go so far to say that it was God who created the heaven and the earth, but something did. That's remarkable thing number one. Remarkable thing number two is that science itself is predicated upon there being order in the universe. In other words, under certain conditions, X must happen, and other conditions, Y must happen, must be a repeatable, predictable phenomenon. There must be order in the universe in order for science to work. Well, if there's order in the universe, then somebody or something created that order. So the Torah does not have a conflict with science. The Torah understands. The Torah is basically written by God, who created the universe, and therefore there wouldn't be anything in there that would contradict observable, correct science. Now, there's a lot of small details and side discussions to have on this topic, but generally speaking, the fact that the entire world now, the scientific world now accepts that there was a creation is a sea change. And the fact that there is order in the universe is a testimony to the existence of an orderer, somebody or something that created that order. And what's really remarkable is that the Big Bang theory, which came into being about 100 years ago, at least they think it did, it's in the writings of a rabbi from 750 years ago, the Ramban. In his explanation on the first verse of Genesis, he gives you the Big Bang. He says that the words tohu and vohu, the world was tohu and vohu. These are phrases for chaos. The first one, tohu, says the Ramban, that all of creation was in a small speck, that a person would look into it, if there would be a person to look into it, and they wouldn't see anything. That's the phrase tohu. It means to wonder. To wonder, is there anything there? Because nothing was observable, because it was all energy. But then as it cooled off and became matter and was about to explode and expand, then it goes from tohu to bohu. Bohu in Hebrew means something is in it. It is in it. There is now matter. There is now content. And it expanded from there. That's pretty much the general lines of the Big Bang, written 750 years ago by Rav Moshe ben Nachmanides, and he was basing himself on Kabbalistic works from centuries before that. Fascinating. So now I think that Yaakov, there's one other detail I want to share, that is that Yaakov, when he did this shtick with the animals, so the Torah says that he did it straight away, without any outside guidance. But when he tells the story to his wives, he tells them that there was an angel involved. He had an angel in a dream who showed him the speckled and the spotted animals. So what was it? Was it himself? Was it an angel? How did this all come to pass? At the beginning of the parsha, Yaakov has a dream, and in his dream he sees a ladder reaching from the earth to the heavens, and angels of God are going up and down on it. Perhaps that ladder is teaching Yaakov a very important fact, and that is that all of the forces of nature, the earth upon which the ladder rests, and the heavens, which is where God is, are connected, and angels are coming up and down. In other words, that the forces of nature in the physical world are also angels. That doesn't mean that there's something with wings going, making the wind blow, going, fuh. That doesn't mean that, but that it means that the wind itself is an angel. The Rambam, great Maimonides, gives the expression that angels are not necessarily creatures, but angels are any emanation of God's will. And God's will can be expressed through natural phenomenon, through the rules and powers of nature. And so Yaakov understands that. So there is a physical appearance of nature, but there is also a spiritual underpinning of nature, which is where the wala can happen. Genetics is a perfect example. Lavan hears about you're going to take only the solid colored animals. It's impossible that they'll have spotted and speckled, because that's the superficial view. But Yaakov understands that there is righteousness, there is justice in nature. He will get his salary. He will get what he fairly deserves. And it just so happens that he was therefore given privy to the concept of genetics, of Mendelian genetics, through an angel, understanding that there are angels in nature itself. It's behind the scenes, but it's voila, it can happen. We just need to believe that it's there. How did Sarah give birth at 90? Because before, when she became pregnant, she laughed. And she says, after I became worn, I once again became rejuvenated. Because she believed it was possible, it happened. That's across the board. Rachel tries external things to have a child. She tries to blame Yaakov, and Yaakov says, it's not up to me, it's up to God. She tries to get mandrakes. That doesn't work either. Instead, that just brings Leah more benefit. She has 2 more sons. And finally, when Rachel gives up and she realizes it's only between me and God, that's when she gives birth, when she realizes that it's possible. And it's possible just directly through God, not through the rules of science the way they seem to be, but rather the deeper science, that God creates nature and nature are angels. We find that God, when he created man, he uses a very misleading term. He says, let us make man in our image. Who's God talking to? Are there other gods? Obviously not. We're a monotheistic religion. This would be polytheism. I think he's talking to the forces of nature. He's basically telling the forces of nature that he created. He's telling those angels, you create man. Make it happen naturally. Make it look like evolution. Make it be evolution, perhaps. Whenever a process is happening in this world that God runs by guiding nature, which he does all the time, and Yaakov understood that, God may use the plural. There's another instance in the Tower of Babel, when the people of the world were speaking one language and then they would diverge into different languages. And God says there also the same phrase, let us go down and confuse their language. In other words, let it happen through nature, through historical processes. Now, that is one way that God rules the world through nature, by guiding it and directing it. And I think that was the story with Yaakov. But there are instances when God suspends nature, overrules nature, if you will. And in those cases, God does not use the plural. He uses the singular. How shall I conceal from Abraham that which I am going to do in Sodom? So God is going to do Sodom and Gomorrah. That's going to be a suspension of nature. God brought the Israelites forth from Egypt with 10 miraculous plagues. These were suspensions of nature. And therefore the rabbis in the Haggadah stress, I will come into the midst of Egypt. Ani velo hamalach. I am not an angel. Not an angel, meaning not the forces of nature. This will be a suspension. This will be a miracle. So God functions in both of those ways. And I think that Yaakov understood that. And Yaakov basically is saying to Lavan, why does he not ask for a normal salary? Because he is saying to Lavan, just like Abraham said to the king of Sodom previously, I don't want your money, I don't want your reward, because I don't want you, king of Sodom, to say, I made Abraham rich. So Yaakov is maybe saying the same thing to Lavan. I don't want you to be saying, I made Yaakov rich. But Yaakov is also saying something even deeper. He's saying, God created nature. And God puts underneath nature his moral nature as well, his moral laws as well, and that is justice and fairness and truth and peace. We find, says the rabbis say, that the world, that God looked in the Torah and created the world, that the default of human nature is to not want to kill, is to not want to steal, is to be honest, only when there is corruption, and corruption can indeed happen. That's the entire challenge of the human race, is to fight that battle. But within nature itself is the will of God. And Jacob says to Lavan, he says it in so many words. He says, this is what we will do, and my righteousness will respond to me, and I will get my reward. In other words, he's saying to him, I don't want you to pay me a salary. I'm going to let God pay me the salary through nature. Because nature follows God's instructions of justice. God can guide nature. And that's exactly what happened here. So you want to know how the Jewish people innovate and invent medications and technologies that improve humanity? The first thing is, just like Sarah, we believe it's possible because we know that there is a ladder and angels. Nature, the powers, the forces of nature are angels. It is possible. If it is something that God wants, then it is something that can absolutely positively happen. And if you believe it's possible, well, then you're not going to stop until it comes true. Shavua Tov.